All right, so I'll start with that one. I'm going to do a mock-up for the package design. I need to actually start with a box, don't I? So let me see if I can find my box that I had last week. Yeah, bear with me for a sec. Maybe I didn't save it. Let me search for it real quick. Okay, this one I'll do. So I have to have a bit more design on here before we can make it into a view. So just to recap this briefly, when you're making the package die, the idea of this is that we're creating a die line, which is where the box, how the box folds together, right? So this line that we're creating, I had given you a demonstration for how to create it. We'd made a sort of scaled down version. So you would have to redo this again. And you could start with an existing T box if you want, take it apart, fold it out and measure off the panels. But you want to make a package die, something like this, and then we're going to add designs to it. So I'd suggested that in the layers that you have three, hang on a second, that you have 3 layers at least. One which has the background on it, one which has the die on it, and then the design in between. Now on here I've got 2 layers in between, but you want to have a sandwich where the top layer, the die, is always left with no other design on it other than the die line. And the reason I'd said that is that if you were doing this as a real job, eventually you'd have to replace that, right? Also, whilst you're working on this project, you might want to have the die pretty visible. So I could set this to like 1 point stroke so that we can clearly see it. But then once you're done with the design and you come to print it out and you want to make a physical mock-up, you'll also need to select that die and make it so that it's barely visible. So I can make it 0.25 of a point at 20%, for instance, and then you'll be able to see it, but it's not too strong. So when we cut it out and fold it together, those lines will sort of get lost in the folds and you won't really notice them, you know?
Should we consider the die kind of like our artboard's bounding, like our boundary of the design to that?
Yeah, in a sense. I mean, this area right here is your bleed, right, that we'd created by making a duplicate of the die, and it goes just past by 1/8 of an inch. This is your actual artboard here, but the artboard is, in some ways, is a little bit irrelevant. We're going to print it out at the end. If you want to do this as an extra credit, you're going to print it out and then fold it together. So you'd print it on, this is on 11 by 17 paper, which is why I had done it that size. But if you're making an actual box, it might be bigger than that. In fact, it will be bigger than that. And so we could print it on that big printer over there. And so the size of your document, the artboard, needs to be big enough to fit onto that, which I believe, George, George, is he not there? George, is he gone out? All right, so I'll check, but I think it's 19 inches we can print across there, and then any length. So you could have that, you could lay it out in such a way that should be able to fit onto that. All right, so let me do a little bit of more design on here real quick. I don't like the grey background, so let's unlock my background. And I only want to change the stroke on this. I'm going to make sure the die line is locked. And I'll just select this background to begin with. Actually, let's select both of these. If I go up to the top here, remember, we could adjust the color by pulling it out like this. if we unlink them, I can then adjust them so that they adjust individually. And then on the front of the box, you're going to obviously need to have the brand logo. I didn't do one, I don't think. I'd started doing one, and then it's B-I-G-E, right?
Yeah. Beagle.
I'd started doing one, and then I deleted it accidentally, so I'll do something else real quick. So hopefully you already have your logos completed, or at least you have sort of a basic idea of what you're doing with the logo by now. Remember that when you're making the logos in Illustrator, you have the ability to create outlines. And so that way you can modify individual letters. I could take off I think it's called a tittle, that's on the top of the letter I, that little dot, and I could replace it with something else maybe. So this is not a very well developed logo, but it will do for the purposes of this demonstration. Can't get that to work. Come on. There we go. And then I need to have some kind of illustration right here. So I'm going to make this. Remember, you're doing 3 different flavors. So if I was going to do Earl Grey, I could look at a little bit about what Earl Grey is. So Earl Grey is a tea blend which has been flavored with oil of bergamot. So then I can maybe look up, what does bergamot look like? I have no idea. And then you can get an image of that plant, you know, to give you an idea. Maybe that's the sort of image that you want to use it. Then you have to decide, do you want to use an illustration or a photograph on the front cover? So it might be something more like this sort of historical illustrations, you know, like something like along those lines that you use. I'd better hurry up and find something, haven't I? Let's see. Can you use illustration? You could use like stock illustrations and stuff like that. Yeah. So you could go to. I'm going to go. Let's go to AI and do Bergamot illustration for tea packet. And then I'm going to choose poster art and hit create. Let's see what this comes up with. So this is dream.ai. That's kind of interesting. Yeah, so this is where it came up with. It's kind of a weird image, but kind of interesting in a way. I don't think I'll actually use that one, but remember you can always regenerate it, so you can hit create again. It will make another one then. So this is I think it's an interesting way to explore ideas, like a little bit like sketching.
Oh, really? Like sketching?
Yeah, it's a little bit like sketching. I mean, sketching is a way to generate ideas, you know.
Yeah, I guess it's just really different.
Sure, obviously it's very different in some ways. That one's kind of interesting. I kind of like that. There's something interesting about that. I'm not sure how it relates to bergamot, but I like the style of it. So we could also try different styles. So if I tried like this realistic one, then hit create. Oh, am I? That might actually make a difference. Is it B-E-R-A? G-A. Bergamot. Oh, yeah, yeah. Let's try that again. This one actually came out kind of cool. I think I'm gonna use this one.
Is this free?
This is free, yeah. So I might use this one and take this element out of it. So this is in Photoshop. If I want to make a selection of this element, let's see how well the object selection tool does. So if I click on here, this is quick selection, choose object select and drag across this cup. See if it finds it. Yeah, it did a pretty good job of finding that actually. So if I go to the layers then, my layers are hidden because I'm on this weird screen right now because of the projector. So layers. I'll double click so this makes it a transparent layer, and then I'll add a layer mask. There's a little bit here where it didn't really quite get it, so I could select that with the pen tool. Make sure that this is a path, so that way what I'm creating here is a path just like you would draw in Illustrator. So I click and drag. It works almost exactly the same in Photoshop as Illustrator, the pen tool. So I can draw around this part, control click or right click on that and choose make selection. I'll leave this on 0 to the feather. Press OK, and then on the mask I would fill it with black. So as I have black in the foreground, it would be option delete, or you could do edit fill. Let's save this file. So I'm just going to save this as a layered file. Hit save. The operation says that directory doesn't exist. All right, let's try again. So teaching. Sorry, bear with me for 1 second. OCC, Spring 23, Illustrator, Module 4, Package T, save. And then I can go back to Illustrator. To place into Illustrator, you would do Shift Command P, and then I can find that file. I can place it either as a linked file or as an embedded file. In this case, I'm going to place it as a linked file in case I want to go back up and edit that mask. So I'll hit place, and then I'll drag out to place that onto the package design. So I'm going to scale that a little bit more. Remember that when you're placing files into Illustrator like this, it's associated with this links panel right here. So if I open up the links panel, you can see that this is the one image that's been placed into this file, and it has a link icon which indicates that this file is linked. Underneath, if I wanted to edit it in Photoshop, I can click on this pencil icon, and then it will open it back up here in Photoshop. So if we turn the mask off, I don't think there actually is anything else I wanted to keep in there actually, but let's say I decided I wanted to keep some of the landscape as well. I could make a selection up here. I'm going to have it come down to the edge of that cup right there. And then up here at the top, let's keep this bit as well. Actually, I can just modify my selection by going Selection, Transform Selection, and I'll drag this up to the top holding Shift. Shift in Photoshop weirdly deconstrains when you're scaling stuff like this, the opposite of most situations. And then if I put my mask back on now and fill that area with white, that part of the illustration would show up again. The corners, sorry, say that again. Oh, sorry, I did Command Delete. So that's the background color. So it would be the same as doing Edit, Fill, and then choosing Background. So then, looking at it now, I think I don't really want the selection to come any further than the edge of the cup. So I'm going to go to Transform Selection one more time, bring this across to here. And let's also bring it up to the halfway point on the cup. and then I'll fill it again. There we go. So if I save this now and go back into here, you'll say some files are missing or modified. So if I hit yes, it'll update that, and then we have this new version of it updated in here. Now maybe I don't want these corners, so I could go up here and make a selection. I'm going to use the pen tool to make this selection, and at the top here I want it set to path. I'll click here, and then drag to create that curve that I want. Go outside of it. To make it into a selection, I right click, choose make selection, press OK, and then I'll fill that with black on the mask. Now if I want that on the same on the other side, I can simply take this selection over here, and then I can do select, transform selection, and I could flip it over itself by doing this. Maybe that's not the best way to do this. I'll do it this way. Let's deselect that. I'm going to go to the paths, so window, paths. I still should have that work path that I created before, so I can take that, I can select this, and then I want to reflect it. So I'll do edit, transform path, reflect. I think it's flip horizontal. I always have to think about this because it's the opposite in Illustrator, but flip horizontal like that. I'll take this over to this side now. Again, control click, choose make selection, press OK. And then on my mask again, I'll fill it with black. Save that file, and then go back into here, and again I can update it, and you can see that those parts are now updated. So we've got something. There probably would also need to be some additional information on here. So it might have something like 20 tea bags. And then there might be other information that goes on there, but I'll leave that for right now. So there might be, for instance, like the net weight or something like that. On the side panel, you could have something like instructions for how to make a cup of tea. You might see that sometimes on the side of tea boxes. So like here, it's got this one. I think is too elaborate, really. The illustrations are too complicated, but same with this one. It gets a little bit too complicated. But you might have some sort of simple. I saw one then for a minute. That looked quite good. Simple sort of step-by-step guide as to how you could make it. What's that? Ask the AI. I don't think this one would be very good at that, actually, to be honest with you, but it might in some other ones. You could certainly ask ChatGPT, what are the steps to make a good cup of tea? So we could get the text from something like this. Yeah. It's a little bit elaborate. Sometimes the ChatGPT explains things wrong, or it's not always accurate. It's grabbing stuff from the internet. It's like a complicated search thing. So you want to read through it and make sure that it's actually making some sense. But it'll probably make sense in terms of the English language, but sometimes it's picking up kind of extraneous information and mixing that in there, and it kind of confuses the meaning of it sometimes. But that's an idea. Anyway, so I needed this just to show you. I'm going to put this text on the side right now and just leave it as lorem ipsum so that we have something on this side. And I'll format it a little bit just to go over formatting text again with you. So remember, in the character panel, we can adjust the size of the text. we can adjust the font. When you're choosing the fonts, you can use filters such as I only want to see serif typefaces, or I only want to see sans serif typefaces, or I only want to see slab serif typefaces, so on. So I'm going to use serif typefaces, and I'll find something that I can use here. And then remember that with the paragraph panel, you can do things like format the alignment. So right now it's left aligned, that's the default in any computer program. But you could have it centered or right aligned. Generally speaking, left aligned type is seen as the most legible. You can also have justified type, which means that both sides are straight, that the type is sort of forced. Now the problem with justified type, particularly with a text box which is quite narrow like this, is you get what are called rivers, those big gaps in between words. So that's why left aligned type is generally used as the most legible form. You might also need to create a barcode and so on. And then let me just put something on the top here. For right now, I'm just going to use this logo. So the logo itself right now is not grouped. Let me go into outline mode so I can select this better, and then select these various parts, and then let's group it together so that when we want to select it in future, I can just grab it. Okay, so now it's grouped together. Alright, so I've got something that I can make into a 3D model. There's a couple of different ways that we can make a 3D view of this, right? So what I'm going to suggest initially is that we could use screen captures of each of these panels. Like this part right here, this color that goes through the back, is part of all of those three panels. So it's hard to separate it, you know? It's hard to cut. We could do it. We could cut that, and we could cut this and so on. But rather than doing that, I'm just going to use a screen capture for each of the different panels. So I want to be fairly close in. That'll give me a bigger image. This would probably be close enough, actually. And I'll do Shift-Command-4. Shift-Command-4 will give me a crosshair, and I can then drag out. Starting in the top left-hand corner of this panel, I can drag out like this, so that I've got a screen capture of that panel. This will save that onto my desktop. I'm going to do another one for this panel right here. And we also need one for this top. So Shift-Command-4, Shift-Command-4, Shift-Command-4. So once I've got those three screen captures, I want to bring those into Illustrator, so I can do Shift-Command-P, that's file place. These will be stored on my desktop, so I can save these screen captures. I'm going to place them as embedded files. So take link off, hit place. I get a loaded cursor with those three elements in there. If I do the arrows on the keyboard, I can toggle through them in case I want to choose which one goes down first. In this case, it doesn't really matter. So I'm just going to click and add these into here. And then I'm going to go to Symbols. And I'm going to drag each of these into the Symbols panel. We'll call this top. We'll call this one side. And we'll call this one front. Now we need some kind of shape that we can use to form the actual 3D model. So if I use the rectangle tool, we could either start and draw the top and then extrude up, or we could use one of the side panels and extrude. Doesn't really matter. I'm going to choose the top and drag across like that. The other thing I need to know is I need to know the extrude depth. So the extrude depth is going to be the height of this box. If I remember, it was 3.5 inches. So if I drag down here, let's see. Yeah, 3.5 inches. Okay, so if I then take this shape, I'm going to make it kind of like a medium grey. It doesn't really matter. I just need to have some color on there. I tried to keep it neutral so it doesn't influence anything else. And then go to Effects, 3D and Materials. You want 3D Classic, Extrude and Bevel. We're going to do Isometric Top, and I'm going to extrude it by 3.5, and right now it's in points, so I need to type in IN to convert it to inches. This will flip back to points, but it is actually 3 inches. And then I can go ahead and go to Map Art. On the top of the box, we can then add the top. Now the top isn't facing the right way, so let me zoom out a little bit. Let's do Scale to Fit. Now it's in position. And then if I go around to the next side, so that's the bottom, this is this surface here. So this is this side panel that I want. So if I go into here and choose side, again, it's too big, so I'll do Scale to Fit. It's upside down as well, so I'm going to rotate it like that. And then if I go to the other side, so this is the front surface now, I can choose front. Again, Scale to Fit. Again, rotate it. So I just put in my cursor just outside the corner so I can rotate it just like you would in most situations. And then I'll put Shade Artwork so that it takes on the tonal values of the 3D model. And then press OK. I don't really like the lighting on this, so I'm going to go to More Options, and I'm going to change the light first of all so that it's facing the front. And I also want to add an additional light. It doesn't seem like it's light enough. So I've put one here on the top. Let's put that around about there. And then go ahead and press OK. So this is one way that you could create a 3D model of your box by using those screen captures and then place them. If you did it in Photoshop, you could do it this way. So if I go File, New, it would want to be a bit bigger than that actually. Let's make this I'm going to make this 8 by 10 at 300. So this is in under image size after I'd made it. And then I can bring in those 3 screen captures. So I do File, Open. I'll open this one. Select all, copy, close, and then paste it into here. I'll open the next one. Select all, copy, close, and then paste it into here. And then the last one. Oops. File, Open. Bring this one into here. Select all, copy, close, and then paste it into here. So now we've got, in Photoshop, you'll have 3 layers automatically because we're pasting these things into Photoshop. Unlike Illustrator. In Illustrator, if you place something into there, it doesn't create a new layer. Because anything you put into Illustrator is always separate. It's on a level within the layer. But in Photoshop, that's a little bit different. So it has to be on a separate layer here. And then I would start with the front. So if I'm doing this in Photoshop, I have to have a kind of visual understanding of perspective to be able to do this well. But basically what you do is, on this layer, I do Command T. I'm going to then hold Command. This will allow me to adjust this side. I'd pull this side up. And I'd also pull the bottom up a little bit. So this is actually giving it perspective rather than isometric because it has a vanishing point. And then this one, I can click on here, put it next to it, do Command T, Control click, hold Command, and then drag this up. I'm also, as I'm dragging it up, by the way, I'm foreshortening it. So this bit, I'm basically eyeballing it. I'm eyeballing how much further do I need to drag it in, you know, this distance, relative to how far it's coming up. And then I'm going to pull this up a little bit here. I'll hit return. Then I'll go to this layer, and I'll put this in the corner right here. Then do Command T. Then if I hold Command, I can just drag this corner to here, drag this corner to here, and then drag this one so that it's in perspective visually. So it'd be about there. This is a little bit off, so let me move that in.
If we wanted to, could we do a similar thing, replacing it in Illustrator and using the perspective grid tool?
Yeah, you could, absolutely, yeah. The only thing is that I don't think that you can put an image. Let me try that, actually. It's a good question. I don't think you can put the image into the perspective grid tool. If I do Shift Command P, let me just try it before I say that for sure. Oh, I need to get my advanced tools. So if I choose the perspective selection tool and drag the image, yeah, it doesn't let me drag it into perspective. You could image trace it, but you're going to mess up the image, you know, like you're going to lose detail in it and stuff. I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't do it that way. So it's not really a good way to do it. So those are the two methods. On this one, I would also need to change the tonal values, of course. So on one side, I could put a levels adjustment. I don't know which side I'm on. Which side am I on? I'm on the front. So here, I might want it to be a little bit darker. I could double click on it. Here in the properties for the levels, I could then darken this a little bit. So actually this side overall. Now it's affecting everything that's underneath it, including the background. But if I hold Option and click on the line that separates these layers, this is now only adjusting the front. So this is the front right here. This is the side. And we might have another levels adjustment now. I'm going to put one just actually above the top. So above the top, if I put another levels adjustment here, and I clip it, and then this time I make it lighter, then you get more of a sense of the 3 dimensions. Because remember, there are really 2 things that define a 3-dimensional object on a 2-dimensional surface. There's some kind of perspective, and then there's chiaroscuro, shading. We might also, on this one, I'm going to change the background on this to black. I'll put this at the very bottom. And then if I was to take the front of this and duplicate it, and then drag this down to here, I actually want it to flip. So I'm going to choose flip vertical, and then pull it down to like there. Then if I hold Command and drag it back up like this, we can use this to create a reflection. So it would be like that. I need to move it up just a little bit more. Lower the opacity. And then on this one right here, I could do the same thing. So if I click on here, I duplicate it by dragging that layer to the new layer icon. Drag this one down. I'm going to reflect it by right-clicking. Oops. Do Command T first. Right-click and then choose Flip Vertical so that it's like this. Because I need this green part to be at the bottom. And then I could do Command T, hold Command on this handle, and drag it back up in this direction so that it lines up again. I'll move it back up a little bit more. And then lower the opacity again. And then you'd have a reflection as if it's sitting on a kind of shiny surface. You might want to, these layers here. Oh no, they're not. It's this one and this one actually, right? So I'm going to put these together and I'm going to group them. And then I can put a mask on that group and run a gradient from black to white through it so that it fades out. I put the wrong things in that group. So this is the front, that shouldn't be there. It's this one. And this one, okay. So if I have those 2 elements, the 2 reflections in that group, I can then run a gradient through that group so that they gradually fade out towards the bottom. So that might be a little bit too much. I'm going to lower the opacity. Let it fade out, kind of like that. So,
What
be
It's like a presentation.
just for presentation, yeah. So you probably wouldn't do this if you were just showing it to the client. It's pretty unlikely you would go to that sort of length because really you just want them to have an understanding of what it looks like before you make the physical mock-up. As far as the assignment is concerned, I think that the way I first showed you was probably the easiest way, using the 3D effects in Illustrator. So you're taking the screen captures and then you're bringing them back into Illustrator, putting them into the symbols project, making a box that's the same size, and then applying those surfaces. All right, does that make sense? You'll follow that?
One question that's
Sure.
related. You said that the die cut that we made in class kind of was smaller than what it should be.
Yeah, I scaled it down. It's like 3.5 inches or something.
Should we look at the
You
actual
should
size
try
of
to
the
get.
circle?
You should try to make it a size that would make sense for a tea box.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Let me see if. What are the dimensions of a standard tea box containing tea bags in the US? Yeah, so 5 inches high, 2.5 inches wide, and then 3 inches. I'm not sure if that's really true. I would buy a tea box, or go and take a ruler to a store and measure them. I'm not sure that's completely true. I actually meant to bring tea buckets here today, and I forgot to bring them, so I apologise. But you've got some tea, right? You can figure it out. All right, let me see. I did a little bit of this, but I'm trying to think if there's anything else I wanted to point out about this. I will do a little bit more about. You don't have to do table of contents, nutritional facts on tea packets, but there are situations in Illustrator where you might have to do text like that, where it's kind of technical. There's like little bits that will have to be organized. So I'm going to go over a little bit briefly of how you can organize text, how to use tabs in Illustrator to align text in certain ways, and so on. So first of all, let's say you wanted to create a tab. A good example of this would be, let's say you have net weight, and then it needs to go across to the other side, and then you have the weight. You could put a tab in there like that by just hitting tab on the keyboard. It will go to wherever the next tab position is set right now, but we can change that afterwards. I don't know what the weight would be, so let's say that. And then if I had something else that comes underneath that, I can hit tab. This time you'll notice that the tab is not in the same place. That's because there's one tab that's in the middle of this word weight. And then I can hit return again, and I'll put, I don't know, fat. 0 grams. Okay, so now these are all in sort of different positions, but if we do Shift Command T, which is to bring up the tabs panel, you can see right now there are actually no tabs in here because they would show up along here. But if I click somewhere in here, you can see that all of these are then lining up together. And you could have them either be right aligned, or centered, or left aligned, or they might be on a decimal point. You know, so let's say you had, I'll do a different example. Let's say you were doing a kind of catalog and you wanted to have a list of description of different products. you could have at the top description, and then tab, and then maybe before that we have item number, and I'll hit tab, and then we'll put retail price, and then I'll hit tab, and I'll put wholesale price. And then underneath that, we'll just put a couple of items, 2, 3, 4, X. And then I hit tab, and we'll put jeans, tab, dollars, $300. How much are jeans these days? $150 wholesale. Hit tab, and then we'll do 45319. Hit tab. I'll put shirt. Hit tab. $190. Hit tab. Dollars. Oops. And then we'll put this as $90. Okay, so once you've got those in there, if we wanted to organize this then, on this row it's a little bit different, but I want to have a tab for where the description goes. So this one I'm going to have it be left aligned. I have one for the retail price and one for the wholesale price. And we can reorganize these later on if we need to, so it doesn't matter if they're not exactly where we want them to be right now. We can readjust it. Then if I select all these, I'd put tabs, one for where the description goes. Again, that's probably going to want to be left aligned. This one here, right now it doesn't really matter because I've just got numbers, but if it had decimals, so let's say I had 0.00 here, and I had 0.00 here, and 0.00 here, and 0.00 here. Here I want it to line up over the decimals. So on this one, I could set it to decimal. We can't really tell any difference here because they have the same amount. But on this one, you'll see a difference. So these ones now, it's lining up over the decimal point rather than over the dollar amount. And then you might need to make this bigger so that we can see the hierarchy. So we could change this to a semi-bold, change this to maybe 14 point. And then you might want to add some space between them. So Option and then down arrow will adjust the leading, so that creates space between those lines of text. And we could also create lines that join these up. So if I select across here, it's a little difficult to read from jeans to retail price. So if I select that tab right there, I could put what's called a leader. I'm going to put space period and then hit return. And then you'll get a series of dots that lead your eye across from there to there. But this means that, you know, oftentimes you'll see people do this and they'll put dot, 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 type it out. Imagine you've got a list of like 30 things and then somebody puts something in, there's a new thing that's been added which is a little bit longer, so you've got to make all those lines a little bit longer now. You've now got to go in. Here you could go in, you could select that whole list of 30 stuff, and you can move that whole column of text to where it needs to go, you know. So this is the advantage of using tabs over just using spaces. Also, these will align perfectly regardless of your type, you know, because you're aligning it to that tab.
Just to remember, it was Shift Command T to pull up tabs?
Yeah, Shift Command T, and it's under here. So, oh, actually, you know what? I might be wrong about that. Window type tabs, it's here actually. Window type tabs is where you get it from, but Shift Command T is the keyboard shortcut. So this is kind of one of those things which is kind of a nuts and bolts type piece of typography. It's not particularly a creative thing, but it's really, really useful if you're doing publishing type stuff. You know, if you're making like a table of contents, for instance, you can put the title chapter. You know, you could have chapter 1, and then whatever page that is. So I'd hit tab, page 30 maybe, page 5, and then we'll go to chapter 2, hit tab, and we'll do this as page 15, chapter 3, and so on. And then with these, again, I can select that select all of that, add a tab in here. Then we can move these wherever they should be. These ones would want to be right aligned, so they're aligning against that edge rather than left aligned, right? And then we can select across here and add our leader. So you could put just a dot if you wanted to, rather than a space dot. They'll be closer together. I usually do a space and then a dot because it feels a bit more open. And then again, we could adjust the leading to open those up a bit so you can read across more easily as well. I can't remember now in Illustrator whether you can do this, so let me see. No. In InDesign, there's a feature where you can do what are called paragraph rules, but unfortunately you can't do that in Illustrator. But that would allow you to create a rule underneath. But let's say I wanted to make a rule underneath to separate these out further. You could draw one line at the top with the line segment tool or with a pen tool, like this. And then if I want this to move so that it's in exactly the same position each time, we select this piece of type and we'll go to the character panel and we look at what the leading is. So the leading is 34.8. And then if I select this line right here and I double click on the move tool or the group selection tool, in the move area here, I'll keep horizontal as 0 and then I'll set vertical to that amount. So it was 34.8 point. If I preview that, you can see it's ending up in the right place. I do copy, and then I could do Command D all the way down the rest of the page if that was a bigger list. That way we've created lines that separate them. That way maybe you don't need the leader, you know, because the lines would separate out that. So sometimes that looks less messy to have those lines that separate the bits of text rather than having the leaders do it.
That was double-clicking group selection tool for the move option.
Yeah, you can actually do it on either the selection tool or the move tool. So you double click on it and then it gives you this move option. And when you do it, you can also check, you can do a variety of things. So you can do like the angle as well. So if I double click here, I was setting it so the horizontal stays the same, so it's 0. And then I was setting the vertical to the amount of the leading, whatever that was, so it was like 34.8. But you could also, if you wanted to, rotate it when you duplicated it and things like that. And then I do copy. I didn't do it this time. Maybe I didn't have it selected. No, it's still there. Maybe it's going way off. Yeah, that's weird. What's it doing it? Let's set this to 0 again. 1 inch, hit copy. So it's working that way. The rotate thing actually doesn't seem to work. But it's useful if you want to just make sure it's an exact distance. And that's when I've usually found it most useful, if you're trying to divide up pieces of type based off of the leading setting, because you're creating lines that go in between individual lines of text. It's pretty useful for that feature. All right, I've been talking for an hour, so I think that's probably enough. I'm going to let you guys work, and I'll come around and help you individually, okay?